After I gave up college to watch my sick grandma, my parents started calling me the house rat. My cousin said, "You're too ugly for college anyway." I spent years silently taking it. Yesterday, I left. This morning, they found every family secret sent to their church group. Now they're crying, "We were just joking." I'm Marla, and I gave up college to take care of my dying grandmother. My parents said I was too soft for the real world. Then they started calling me the house rat. My cousin told me I was too ugly for college anyway. I spent 6 years cleaning their floors, swallowing their insults, and managing my grandmother's illness while they lived their lives. Yesterday, I finally left. This morning, they woke up to every dirty secret they ever tried to hide, sent straight to their church group, employers, and neighbors. Now they're begging me to come back. They say it was all just a joke. But I'm done being their joke. I was born and raised in Spokane, Washington, and up until yesterday, I lived in a house I now believe I should have escaped from years ago. My family is the kind of people who care more about appearances than the truth. We lived in a faded blue 2-story house near 29th Avenue, in a neighborhood where everyone pretends to be decent, God-fearing, and close-knit. But behind the closed doors of that house, there was no warmth. Just an obligation. And cruelty disguised as jokes. When I was 19, I got accepted into the University of Washington. Environmental science has always been my passion. I'd spent my teenage years volunteering for river cleanups, collecting aluminum cans, and watching documentaries while other kids went to parties. I wasn't popular, but I had something I loved. And when the acceptance email came through, I remember screaming into my pillow with joy. I even printed the email and showed it to my grandma, who had raised me more than either of my parents ever did. But 3 days later, Grandma collapsed while tending to the backyard roses. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and just like that, everything shifted. My parents, Clarice and Franklin, immediately looked at me like I was the obvious choice. They never even discussed it. "You're not going to Seattle, right?" my mom asked like it was rhetorical. "You'd never survive out there. Not with that soft head of yours." "I mean," Dad said while sipping from his Coors Light, "you're here anyway. May as well make yourself useful." I don't know why I didn't fight it harder. Maybe because I was afraid. Maybe because I felt guilty leaving Grandma behind. Maybe because they'd spent my whole life grooming me to think I owed them everything. So, I deferred college for 1 semester. Then another. Then I stopped reapplying altogether. I became Grandma's full-time caregiver. I did everything: bathed her, dressed her, prepared her meals, monitored her medication schedule, even helped her to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Clarice and Franklin didn't lift a finger. They used to tell people that we take care of Grandma full-time. No. I did. They'd go to barbecues and church socials while I changed adult diapers and read medical forums about Parkinson's side effects. And over time, they started referring to me as the house rat. It started as a one-time joke. My dad walked into the kitchen while I was scrubbing the floor on my hands and knees and said, "Look at her, scurrying around. Our little house rat." Mom laughed. I remember freezing, soap water on my arms, and looking up, trying to tell myself they didn't mean it that way. But they did. From then on, it became my name. "Hey, house rat, bring me some tea." The house rat's cooking again. Don't mind her, she's just the rat, lives in the walls now. Even in front of family, they'd call me that. Sometimes people would laugh awkwardly. Sometimes they'd just look away. I stopped being a person to them. I was an appliance. Then Rayanne, my cousin, came into the picture. Rayanne was the kind of person who wore expensive perfume even when she was staying at our house. I'm an NYU student, a marketing major, and a fashion intern. Always with a new boyfriend, new hairstyle, new thing she was into. She'd show up during holidays and treat me like I was the maid. One time, she watched me while I was folding laundry and said, "You know, maybe it's a good thing you didn't go to college. Like, no offense, Marla, but you're kinda too ugly for it." She said it with a smile. I think she genuinely believed it was fine to say that. Like I'd just nod and thank her for her honesty. I said nothing. Just folded another towel. That was my role, silent, obedient, the emotional sponge of the house. I cooked their meals. I cleaned their mess. I listened to their problems. When Franklin got into a drunk driving accident in 2021, I was the one who drove him to his court-mandated AA meetings. When Clarice got caught stealing office supplies at work and was nearly fired, I wrote an apology letter for her. And when Rayanne's fake internship blew up and she needed to borrow money from Grandma's pension fund, I was the one who figured out how to balance the books so the utilities wouldn't get shut off. I should have exploded years ago. But I didn't. I just started taking notes. I bought a small black notebook and started logging everything. Dates, comments, screenshots, even printouts. I backed it all up on a USB and stored it inside one of Grandma's old knitting tins. I don't know why I started doing it. Maybe it was my way of proving to myself that it was real. That it wasn't all in my head. Because abusers gaslight you in the most subtle ways. They laugh while they wound you. They say they were just joking. They tell you you're overreacting. And when you finally stand up, they act like you're crazy for not having laughed along. Years passed. Grandma died in the fall of 2023. Peacefully, in her sleep, clutching my hand. Clarice cried, loud, theatrical sobs, but didn't take a single day off work. Franklin drank more. Rayanne posted a tribute selfie and tagged it #RipBestie. I didn't cry until a week later. In the laundry room. Alone. With Grandma gone, I had no purpose. They started dropping not-so-subtle hints that I should keep taking care of the house. I'd spent 6 years being their unpaid maid and nurse. They expected it to continue. One afternoon, Clarice handed me a broom and said, "Now you've got no excuse to mope. Chop chop, rat." That night, I made a plan. I packed my bags, quietly, slowly. I found an old friend, Margot, from high school who lived in Seattle. She was kind. She always had been. She offered me a spot on her couch and a cup of tea. But before I left, I scheduled emails. All those files? The notebook, the screenshots, the photos, the audio recordings? I compiled them. Created folders. Organized them by person, by year, by subject. Then I drafted emails. One to their pastor, another to Clarice's boss, one for Franklin's construction clients, and a very special one to Rayanne's new internship recruiter. Each one contained every dirty secret they ever tried to bury. Proof of fraud. Affairs. Racist and bigoted comments. Theft. Tax issues. Hospital records falsified. Threatening messages they'd left me when drunk. Videos. I scheduled all the emails for the next morning, 8 a.m. sharp. And then, I got on a 6:30 a.m. Greyhound bus. That's when the phone started ringing. Clarice called first. Then Franklin. Then Rayanne. When I didn't pick up, they started texting. "Call us now. What the F***K did you do? You need to fix this." Then finally. "We were just joking." That's where they lost me. I sat in Margot's apartment, barefoot on her hand-me-down rug, with a lukewarm mug of coffee in my lap, staring at my old phone buzzing on the counter. I didn't even feel nervous. That surprised me. I thought I'd be shaking, or maybe even crying. But there was just a strange quietness in my chest. Like when a tornado finally passes, and you realize you're still standing. Margot came in from her bedroom, half awake, her toddler son slumped over her shoulder. She rubbed her eyes and nodded toward my phone. "That's it?" "Yep," I said. She sat down beside me. "You good?" I nodded, then stared ahead. "I think so." By noon, the voicemails turned from fury to pleading. Rayanne left one that made me laugh out loud. "Marla, I don't know what you think you're doing, but this is slander. It's also cruel, okay? I'm not perfect, but no one deserves this. You're ruining people's lives over what? A few jokes?" "Oh, Rayanne." Then Clarice called again, this time sobbing in a way that almost sounded real. "Honey. Please call me. We didn't know it was hurting you. We thought you knew we were playing around. We didn't mean anything by it. It was just a nickname." I had to walk out onto Margot's balcony after that. The breeze smelled like wet pavement and lilac. I hadn't had my own silence in years. I stood there with my arms crossed, feeling it all rush in. The quiet. The freedom. The fact that I didn't owe anyone an explanation anymore. Later that afternoon, I opened my laptop. My inbox was flooded, some people from their church, people who remembered Grandma and always wondered why she never came to group events, now realizing she was basically confined to a single bedroom for the last years of her life. A woman named Mrs. Halverson, one of the longest-standing members of their church, wrote me a direct email, "Marla, I always had a feeling something was wrong. Your grandmother was a lovely woman. Thank you for telling the truth. People are rattled, but maybe it's time some of them are." It made me cry. I cried harder when I saw an email from Clarice's boss. She'd been placed on indefinite leave pending internal review. Apparently, the screenshots I'd included of her making inappropriate jokes about patients in the office break room were enough to make the HR department open a full investigation. Franklin wasn't doing any better. His biggest client, a local housing contractor, emailed him a notice that his job was on hold until further notice after being shown photos of him passed out in a truck with empty beer cans and police dashcam footage from his DUI incident. Rayanne, meanwhile, had been dropped from her unpaid internship for professionalism concerns. Someone in HR forwarded her an email from a burner account, my burner account, with attachments of her fake resume and credit card charge logs showing thousands pulled from Grandma's account labeled as textbooks and housing even though she never lived outside her college dorm. I didn't hear her voice again after that. But the calls kept coming. Now from numbers I didn't recognize. Some from Spokane, some from Seattle. Mutuals. Family friends. Church members. All of them acting like they didn't know anything had been going on. A few were genuinely kind. One woman named Terry, who used to babysit me when I was little, sent me a Facebook message. "I know you probably don't want to hear from anyone, but I just want to say that I believe you. And I'm sorry. I'm so sorry no one saw what they were doing to you." I responded to her. She was the first person I'd responded to from that world. That night, Margot made us spaghetti. I ate 2 bowls. We stayed up watching some dumb baking competition on Netflix. I didn't talk much, but she didn't press. She just handed me a soft blanket and sat beside me like we were teenagers again. "You know," she said finally, "I always wondered why you never left." I looked over at her. Me too. That night I slept for 10 straight hours. No one called me the house rat. No one asked for food. No one coughed and needed medicine. No one asked why the laundry wasn't done. Just quiet. The next day, I went to Seattle Central College to sit in on a campus tour. It wasn't a prestigious university, but they had a solid environmental science program and decent transfer options. I kept to the back of the group, mostly just listening. A woman in her 50s stood beside me at one point and said, "You starting over too?" I nodded. She smiled. "Good for you." For once, it didn't feel like pity. Just recognition. On my way back to Margot's, I stopped at a coffee shop near Capitol Hill and bought a notebook. Not a black one this time. This one was yellow and soft-covered, with thick paper. I wrote my name inside. Just my name. No one else's. When I got home, I plugged in my phone again, part of me morbidly curious if the calls had stopped. They hadn't. Franklin had left a new voicemail. "All right, enough's enough. You made your point. You want to come back, we can talk. But this childish ends now, you hear me?" I deleted it. Then I got a text from an unknown number. "You didn't have to do this, Marla. This family was all you had." No name attached, but I could guess. Probably someone who wanted everything swept under the rug again. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked into Margot's kitchen, pulled a bottle of ginger ale from the fridge, and sat on the floor with her kid, showing him how to build towers out of cereal boxes. It sounds ridiculous, but I couldn't remember the last time someone handed me something without expecting me to fix or clean something in return. Margot walked in and saw me sitting there and said, "So what's next?" I looked up at her. And I said, "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's mine." The next Sunday, I got a text from an old neighbor. Lydia Morgan, sweet but nosy, lived 3 houses down from us for nearly 20 years. She was the type who'd walk her dog 3 times a day just to check on everyone's lawn and know who was coming and going. Her message simply read, "Marla. You weren't exaggerating. Church was a mess this morning." Clarice tried to do the opening reading like nothing happened. The pastor didn't even make eye contact with her. Rayanne left crying halfway through the service. I just wanted you to know, people are finally seeing what you went through. For some reason, that hit harder than I expected. Not the gossip or the spectacle, but the fact that someone finally believed me without 1,000 pages of proof. For so long, I'd been trapped in a house where everything was reversed. Cruelty was normal. Denial was safe. And the moment I spoke up, even silently, it was considered betrayal. Now, someone who'd watched from a distance all those years was telling me, you weren't invisible. We just didn't see it clearly before. Later that day, Margot and I walked around Lake Union. It was a sunny, crisp kind of afternoon, and there were families out, couples riding tandem bikes, people walking dogs in jackets that cost more than my entire wardrobe. It felt like another universe. You're really settling in, Margot said as we sat on a bench eating teriyaki chicken from styrofoam containers. I nodded. I still don't feel like I deserve it. She didn't say anything for a while, then she looked at me. Marla, you were drowning. And they kept handing you anchors. I blinked. My throat went tight. Now you're finally swimming, she said. The fallout from the email bomb kept unraveling. A week later, Rayan posted a long, self-serving essay on Instagram, pretending to take accountability while never actually saying what for. She referred to her actions as growing pains and hinted that someone with a grudge had tried to ruin her career. Comments were split. Some sympathized. Others weren't so kind. The post lasted a day and a half before she deleted it. According to a friend of a friend, she'd moved back in with her parents, her real ones, across the state in Wenatchee. Word was, her internship prospects were dead for the next year at least. Clarice, meanwhile, had taken a personal leave from the dental clinic. A local moms group on Facebook shared some screenshots from the email I'd sent. They weren't even the worst ones, just enough to show her mocking patients behind their backs and stealing samples from the office to resell online. The comment thread was brutal. Franklin had it worse in a different way. His construction jobs dried up fast. Apparently, some of the contractors he worked with were church members or friends of friends, and no one wanted to be associated with the kind of man who let his daughter clean bedpans while calling her a rodent for 6 years. I never felt joy reading those updates. Not exactly. But I did feel relief. Like the weight of being their secret keeper was finally off my back. And I started making small steps forward. I met with an admissions advisor at Seattle Central. Told her my situation honestly, well, most of it. I didn't use words like abuse or trauma. Just said I'd spent the last several years caregiving and now wanted to finish what I'd started. She looked me in the eyes and said, "You're not too late." I think I needed to hear that more than anything. Around this time, I finally bought my own phone. I tossed the old one into a donation bin and signed up for a new plan, new number, new everything. It felt like shedding a layer of skin. The first person I texted from it was Margot. The second was a professor whose lecture I'd sat in on, a woman in her 60s named Dr. Valdez who specialized in urban sustainability. She'd spoken with so much passion about environmental justice and how city planning could shape the next 50 years. I emailed her afterward and asked if I could sit in again. She responded with a list of reading suggestions and told me to drop by any time. She even offered to mentor me if I applied. That night, I walked to the corner store and bought myself a slice of carrot cake and a small bottle of sparkling cider. It was the dumbest little celebration. But I felt more proud of myself than I had in a decade. The texts and voicemails from my family finally began to slow. After a few weeks, Clarice sent a final message, "We're willing to talk. But only if you're going to be respectful and stop embarrassing us." I didn't respond. They still didn't get it. Maybe they never would. In their minds, they were the ones being hurt. They weren't used to being exposed. Their entire world had been carefully curated in that community: church potlucks, holiday cards, gossip at the nail salon. The image of a tight-knit, God-fearing family who gave everything to care for their elderly matriarch. The truth disrupted that. And it scared them more than I ever had. I started therapy at a sliding scale clinic not far from Margot's. My therapist was a sharp but soft-spoken man named Alam who never told me what I should feel. He just asked questions I wasn't used to answering. Like, what did you need most as a child? Or, if you didn't have guilt, what would you be free to choose? Some sessions left me drained. Others left me angry. But every time I walked out of his office, I felt like I'd reclaimed something. I even began applying for scholarships. Small ones. Ones that didn't require an essay or asked just for a personal statement. I wrote about environmental resilience and community care. I didn't talk about my past, not yet. But I knew the story was in there, between the lines. One night, while working on a statement for a $500 grant, I typed a sentence that made me stop and reread it. I've spent most of my life fixing problems that weren't mine. I stared at it for a long time. Then I smiled. About a month and a half after I left Spokane, Margot came into the kitchen with a puzzled look on her face. "Hey," she said, "some lady dropped this off. Said you'd know what it was." She handed me a small envelope. No return address. I opened it and saw a folded letter, handwritten on thin stationery. Inside was something wrapped in a scrap of yellowed fabric. The letter was from Lydia Morgan. "I thought you should have this. Your grandma kept it on her nightstand for years. I saw Clarice throwing it in a donation box last week. I thought she wouldn't want you to lose it." Inside the cloth was Grandma's old necklace. Nothing fancy. Just a silver locket with a pressed forget-me-not inside. She used to say the flower reminded her of better beginnings. I held it in my palm for a long time. The metal was cool and smooth. I didn't cry. But I wore it that night when Margot and I went out for burgers. She didn't comment. Just noticed it, nodded, and handed me a curly fry. We sat on the curb outside the restaurant, watching the city lights flicker on like a slow wave. Somewhere behind me, the world I escaped was still licking its wounds. But I wasn't looking back anymore. A few weeks after receiving Grandma's locket, I found myself standing at the base of the university steps in a blazer I borrowed from Margot and a pair of slacks that actually fit. I had a binder tucked under one arm and a reusable water bottle clutched in the other. I was going to give a presentation, my first in 6 years. Dr. Valdez had asked me to speak briefly in one of her community-focused sustainability seminars. It wasn't a huge crowd, maybe 30 students and 2 guest speakers, but I'd prepared obsessively for it. The topic was invisible labor and environmental justice. The idea had come from a conversation we'd had in her office, where I told her how caregiving work, especially unpaid, unseen labor done by women, parallels so much of the thankless work that keeps the environment running, cleaning, maintaining, preserving, and never getting credit. "You've got the lived experience to talk about it," she said. "You should." So I did. It went well. People listened. A few even took notes. And when I walked off the stage, I felt something I hadn't in years: power. Real, quiet power. Not the kind you scream or prove. The kind that says, "I know who I am. And I don't need your permission to matter." I didn't expect what came next. 3 months after leaving, I got a call from a law office in Spokane. I didn't recognize the number and let it go to voicemail. But when I finally listened, I had to sit down. "This is Sarah from Norgren and Keys Law. We're calling on behalf of your grandmother's estate. There are some documents we need you to review. Please call us back at your earliest convenience." I did. They emailed me the forms. Turns out, Grandma had written a will. An updated one. 2 years before she passed. Quietly. Privately. Without Clarice's knowledge. And she left everything to me. The house, her modest savings, even her old Buick parked under a tarp in the backyard. She'd added a stipulation that Clarice and Franklin were to be given no access, possession, or occupancy of her property or assets under any condition. It was witnessed and notarized. I stared at the PDF and felt the air leave my lungs. She'd known. All those nights, all that silence. She'd known what they were doing to me. And this was her final word. I flew back to Spokane for the legal process. Just for a day. Quietly. I didn't tell them I was coming. But I did go to the house. It was worse than I remembered: neglected, musty, the yard overgrown. They'd moved out weeks ago after the fallout. Rayanne had returned to Wenatchee. Franklin was working odd jobs outside the city. Clarice, I later heard, had tried to sue the dental clinic for wrongful termination and lost. I changed the locks. I walked through every room with a trash bag in one hand and my phone in the other, taking photos of the damage. The walls were yellowed with smoke. The carpets were matted with stains. But when I stepped into Grandma's room, it was still. Still and quiet and sunlit. I opened her old nightstand. Inside was a note I hadn't seen before, folded and tucked beneath a box of tissues. If you ever read this, Marla, it means you made it out. And I am so proud of you. I'm sorry I couldn't protect you from them. But I saw you. Every day. I saw your love. And I never mistook you for anything less than my saving grace. Don't carry their shame any longer. Be free. And whatever you do, don't give them the house. I sat on the bed and let that settle into my bones. Then I got to work. The final revenge wasn't loud. It was patient. I cleaned up the house. Room by room. I didn't restore it, didn't paint it pretty, I made it functional. I hired a friend of Margot's from Seattle who was a realtor. We listed it for sale. It didn't fetch a fortune, but enough. Enough to fund the next 2 years of my college education. Enough to cover my therapy costs without worry. Enough to move Margot and her son into a better apartment in Queen Anne. And here's the part that felt like justice in the most poetic sense. The house was sold to a nonprofit that converted it into a shelter for women aging out of caregiving roles, nurses, long-term family caregivers, and women leaving domestic situations who needed somewhere to land while finding their footing again. I sent the paperwork to Clarice's church. No words. Just a screenshot of the shelter's welcome brochure with a caption, "The house rat turned it into a home for people who deserve one." Clarice tried to call. So did Franklin. Voicemails, emails, messages through mutual acquaintances. I didn't respond. Not out of spite. Out of peace. Because I finally didn't have anything left to prove. They couldn't take anything from me anymore. Not my time, not my sanity, not my story. And certainly not Grandma's house. A few weeks later, I spoke at the shelter's opening. Just a few words. I told them how the house had been filled with pain, but that now it would be filled with possibility. And then I told them something I'd written in my yellow notebook: sometimes revenge is just the full truth, delivered without apology. People clapped. Some cried. A woman hugged me after and said, "You did something good, honey. Something righteous." I smiled. Because I had. Now, I sit in the student union at school, with my laptop open and a grant application halfway done. I have no idea where I'll be in 5 years, but for once, I know the road ahead is mine to walk. I'm not the house rat. I'm Marla. The one who got out. And burned the cage behind her.